I had enough awareness to know that I was clearly living out some sort of horrific childhood pattern in real time. Like I was not just living out a pattern, but that our timelines had merged, that there was some way in which I was both my mother and myself and my child self all at the same time. And all of it was collapsing.
It can be hard in the midst of so much violence, oppression, and despair to believe in a just, loving, and compassionate world. I'm also clear that if ever we need a collective hold of that possibility, it is now. Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is a podcast where I share stories, reflections, anecdotes, and epiphanies from my daily existence in an effort to collect evidence that life is truly loving and kind, full of intention, guiding us all toward greater love, grace, and compassion, proving that if we learn to look and listen, we will hear and see that life is indeed unfolding for our highest good. Join me as I share evidence that life is happening on purpose with radical love in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks.
When I let my grief take up all the space of 1,000 oceans that were washing over me every day, I have to say, I felt joy, oh boy, I felt unexpected, unusual, surprising waves of joy.
Hello, friends, and welcome to Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor, the podcast where we collect evidence that life is indeed happening on purpose, in radical love, in service of our highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks. I am your grateful and glorious host, Sonya, back with another episode. I hope everyone's been well. You know, I really feel the weeks between us connecting. I feel them. So many things happen. Like I told you, I think the last time I recorded, I was in Spain and I was in Colombia the episode before that. And now I'm in California in Big Sur on the coast of California. And on my way back to Durham. And then the next time I talk to you, I think I'll be in Kenya. So, you know, clearly life has your girl out in these streets. And it's been glorious and profound and beautiful. And I am more and more and more feeling like living into the felt experience of life happening on purpose in service of my highest good, even when it sucks, especially when it sucks. And because I'm knowing that, it's sucking less and less and less. And that part is really cool, that there is something transmuting about recognizing that life is intentional and happening in service of our well-being that allows the harmonious experiences of our well-being to feel more pervasive, to feel more florid in these streets in some ways. And that's been beautiful to experience. It's been really lovely to have that experience. This episode, I'm ready to talk about the Great Collapse. I have no idea how long it's going to take to tell this story. I have told bits and pieces of it. I don't know that I have ever sat down and said it in one, fell swoop. And I don't, we'll see how much detail wants to come out about it. We'll see. I don't know yet. But I do know that there is a completion that has happened in that experience, that there is something that got done, that was began there, that is in its completion phase and integration phase, that the lessons that life was teaching me in that moment have been embodied over the last 5 years and are now moving into practice, like regular practice, like practice as a regular part of my life. And I'm feeling really excited about that. I'm feeling excited about that. And so I just want to take a few breaths and let myself return to that place. And what feels present is how much I didn't want to see back then. I was living in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I was living with my partner at the time. And so much of my life was me really not wanting to face the things I didn't want to face. And I want to say this for folks who may be like me and have taken the long road to healing. It is not a linear path. It is not inherently simple. It's not like knowing is enough. And that feels really important to say, that knowing is not inherently enough. I mean, when people say when you know better, you do better, and it's just not true. It's just not true, because knowing is a mental practice. Knowing is about the mind. And when something is embodied, when something is integrated, you do better. It's not just about having the information. I had the information, and there were things that I had hidden so far away from myself that there was just no way that it was going to work. It was just no way that knowing was going to be the thing that changed me. I am an experiential learner, and life knows that about me. And I was like, well, we just gonna have you give your girl an experience. And so I think the thing that's important to know about this time in my life is, when I moved to New Zealand in October of 2017, I was very much complete with the United States of America. I had seen the inevitable outcome. I went to New Zealand to visit in 2016, and I knew during that visit, before the election ever happened, I knew that the current president of the United States was going to be the president of the United States. And I knew that I had no interest in hanging out in whatever it was that he had planned for his tenure. And so I had been plotting an escape out of the United States. And I was there was a book called How to Get Out, Escaping the United States. And I started, and it just had a collection of countries that existed in their processes for entry and the state of, social dynamics and finance and all sorts of information about these different countries and what it might take to move there. And so I bought that book. I also bought copies for many, many people. And I started passing it out. And I was like, it's time to get out. And I felt it really strongly. And basically what I was intuiting is what we're living in now. I generally have about a 10-year lag time of seeing something before it's fully in its manifestation. And so here we are at 9 years, and what I was seeing is coming to pass. And that's not fun. Let me just be clear, y'all. I don't enjoy seeing the future. It is a gift in the opportunity to be preparatory when life is asking me to be preparatory, but it's not fun. Particularly because you can't convince people that you see the future. All right. And so you can know something and be the only person knowing it, or be one of few people knowing it, and then be alone in your experience of trying to help people see what you're seeing. I have found that to be the case throughout my life. And my job has been to learn to mind my business and know what I know, and to share when invited with people who are interested in what it is that I know. And otherwise, to mind my business and allow people to have the experience that they signed up for having in life. And that has been a hard-won lesson, y'all. Hard one. And so anyway, I saw it. I knew what was getting ready to go down. I didn't want to be in it. I moved to Aotearoa, and I think that I talked about how I got there, but really quickly. I was there visiting. Someone in the United States told me that someone in New Zealand was a friend and that they connected us via email. That friend had a birthday party the second day that I was in Aotearoa and invited me. I went to the birthday party. That person happened to be recruiting for a social impact entrepreneur fellowship called the Edmund Hillary Fellowship that was providing global impact visas for people incubating social impact projects to incubate them out of Aotearoa. And I was like, I'm a social impact entrepreneur. This sounds great. I want to apply. And the process went, I met with the CEO at the end of my trip in October. He invited me back in February to speak at a festival conference that they had. April, I put in my application. June, I got accepted. July, I processed my visa. And I moved to New Zealand October of 2017. So exactly 1 year of process from idea to implementation took 12 months, which is wild to move your entire life. I had never lived outside of the United States ever before. And one of the things that kept coming to me while I was there was I'm moving to a place where no one loves me. And that was it was a wild conceptual reality to go into. Right? It was like, oh, no one here loves me. What does it mean to live in a place where no one loves you? And, while I was there, one of the, biggest areas of challenge was that I fell into deep loneliness, which I knew was going to happen in many ways. I was having a 12th house transit. We'll talk a little astrology. I was having a 12th house transit. 12th house is the unseen. It is the house of spiritual work. It is the house of long distance travel for the purpose of spiritual reasons, which I, of course, did not know back then. I didn't know anything about astrology at that level at the time. So I did not know that it was the house of long distance travel for the purpose of spiritual reasons. And that it's also the house of isolation. And indeed, I was very isolated, very, very isolated and very by myself. I told people I moved to an island, off an island at the bottom of the world, up 40 flights of steps. That's how far I went. So New Zealand is an island, and the closest thing to New Zealand is Antarctica. So it is literally the bottom of the world or the top of the world, depending on how you're oriented. And then I moved to an island called Waiheke Island, which is like a 40-minute ferry ride off of the harbor in Auckland, which is the largest city. So 40-minute ferry ride, and then a drive up some winding hills through the bush, and then a house in the side of a mountain up 40 flights of stairs. That's where I moved. That's how much I wanted to get away from y'all. And by y'all, I meant everything, and probably also including myself. I was super burnt out. I had been running The Body Is Not an Apology, the corporation, and I was burnt out beyond burnout, and I was exhausted beyond exhausted. And actually moving there was the beginning of transitioning The Body Is Not an Apology from a digital media company with like 27 staff in 7 countries or something like that, to me and one other person, my faithful teammate, Dr. Shannon Weber. And that was it. And yeah, so that was the beginning of a really big unraveling for me. And I was deeply, deeply lonely. And I had met a person on my visit to New Zealand who was like, there was an instant connection, an instant invitation to know each other. They are incredibly charismatic, and everything they said sounded like poetry, which, if you know anything about me, you might know I'm into that. Words of affirmation is definitely my love language. And everything they said just was like honey falling off their tongue. And they offered to be my friend. And I really needed a friend when I moved to Aotearoa. And so me and this person became friends. and they were in a partnership at the time, and so there wasn't really an option to be anything more than friends, but it definitely was crushy. You know, it's definitely crushy on them, and I definitely felt like they were crushy on me. I knew they were crushy on me. I could feel it. And I also knew they had a partner. And so I was like, great, that's not what we're doing. And when I tell you I was lonely at a soul level, right, that there was something that felt so bottomless inside of me. I remember I had a chalkboard in my kitchen, and I wrote on the chalkboard, I surrender my longing to God. Because I just was longing for companionship, longing for connection, longing for love. And here's the hot take. The longing is information, and the information is not that the thing doesn't exist. It's that the thing does exist, and there's something in you that is making it indetectable. That there is some trauma, some unhealed thing in you that is making that longing present itself as lack. But lack is an illusion. And so when we're experiencing lack, what we're experiencing is the information that there is blockages, that there are blockages in us that are keeping us from being able to experience the full abundance of life. And that those blockages are they don't mean you did something wrong. It just means there's something that wants to be cleared. Right? And it doesn't mean, I think sometimes when I talk like this, people think, like they're, Sonya's, acting like there are not external factors in the world. There are 100% external factors in the world. I have lived them. I assure you, I know them personally and well. And what I know to be true in my journey is that as I have cleared what there is to be cleared inside of me, those external factors have less and less and less impact on my material existence. And that is true. It is just truth. And I know it to be true. I think I said this in another episode, but if I did, I'm going to say it again. I know it to be true because there are people who experience the felt experience of liberation and are in prison. That there are people who experience the felt experience of liberation and are in, bodies that are in incredible pain or are immobile. There are people who experience liberation and are in some of the most heinous circumstances of human existence. And so external factors exist, and they do not trump the inner understanding of our own wholeness. What I'm saying is nothing is greater than you. No external factor is greater than you. In your whole embodied, integrated expression, which is your divine self. There is nothing greater than you. There is no external factor that is greater than you. And that feels important to know and to remember and to stand 10 toes down in. Otherwise, everything else is just beatable, right? Then you're just beatable by everything, right? I was like, that's a great way to give away your power, is to decide that the external factors are greater than you, right? So anywho, I say that to say that the longing and the loneliness inside of me was information. And it wasn't information about how isolated I was, although it was, but the isolation was a thing I called in. I decided to move to an island off an island at the bottom of the world up 40 flights of stairs. Nobody put me there. I chose that, right? And so there was something in it that, even if not at a conscious level, I knew was trying to uncover something. And so me and this person, end up in a relationship. They exit their relationship before anything physical happens between us. They end their other relationship, and we end up in a romantic partnership. And here's what's true. I knew that I didn't have no business in that relationship. I knew I didn't. I knew that this person was not, that there were areas of development that they were moving in or not moving in that were incompatible with the work that I'd been doing, that they had patterns that resembled patterns of old relationships, and very specifically patterns related to my relationship with my mother. And I knew that, that those things were ultimately incompatible in the long term. But when I tell you they spoke in poetry, y'all, when I tell you they said all the best things. At one point, this person told me I was infinity dressed in skin. And I said, you know what? I ain't going nowhere. I ain't going nowhere. And I told my therapist, I ain't going nowhere. Like, I'm just going to ride this ride until I get kicked off of it. Because hear me now and believe me later. That's a really foolish orientation to life. I do not suggest it. I did it. I don't, 10 out of 10 do not recommend waiting for life to kick you off the ride. Don't do it. But it's absolutely what I did. I waited for life to kick me off the ride. And, my therapist was like, I told you. It was rough. And so, I got into this relationship. We ended up living together. Again, 10 out of 10 do not recommend. Not because, not the way that I did it, which is already being in a relationship that I had already knew was a function of some of my old patterns and that was not likely to be sustainable because of some key incompatibilities. And then when they suggested we move in together, I said yes. It's foolishness, y'all. So I don't do it. And so we moved in together in October of 2019. And the relationship had challenges. And those challenges were rooted in my codependence. That's the long and short of it. One of the key dynamics of my relationship with my mother was trying to save her. All the sort of calamities that those woundings created. And one of the questions that I was grappling with when my mother died in 2012, October of 2012. Now, I'm sitting here right now being like, I want to say that I might have moved into this house on the anniversary of my mother's transition. I might want to say that. And I'm just now realizing that in real time. My mother transitioned in October of 2012. And one of the things that I struggled to understand after her death was, we were relatively estranged, limited contact, limited communication when she passed away. And I had taken some really big boundaries around engaging with her. And one of the questions that I was holding after she passed was it possible to love her more up close in her struggles? did I have to, there was the story that I abandoned her, which is also the story that I held that she abandoned me. And so, there was some big trauma there that I was working through. And one of the things that I was testing, literally, I was testing it, was, can I be in loving up close relationship with someone as they work through their stuff? Or did I need to step as far away as I did, right? So that was the experiment that I was in. And the other part of the experiment, because I was like, wait a minute, that's the experience I was in the relationship before that. Oh, there's a pattern if you can't see. But what I wanted to see was if I could be up close and still not meddle and still let them be on their journey, right? Now, the answer to that question is if the journeys aren't compatible, then it's probably not in alignment to be on a journey with someone whose journey isn't compatible with yours. That's what's true, but it was difficult for me to see that. Again, knowing is not enough. I needed the lived experience of having that reflected back to me, that no, Sonya, that creates chaos and havoc in your life. And so we moved in together in October of 2019. There are all kinds of fascinating challenges that ensue inside of the relationship over that time. And I go away in early January. I go away to the United States for what will be 3 weeks of tour in the U.S., of speaking engagements across the U.S. And that those speaking engagements will ultimately, provide my income for the next 4 months. So what I would do is about every 3 or 4 months, I would go to the U.S. I'd do 3 to 4 weeks worth of touring and speaking engagements, stack up some coins, come back to Aotearoa, sit for 3 or 4 months, and then go back and do that again. And so that was how it was working. So January, I leave. Now, actually, let's rewind before we get there. My birthday is November 12th. And so November 12th of 2019, I have a really low-key birthday. My friend Hillary came into town. I said came into town like she didn't get on a plane from California and fly 13 hours to come spend 3 days with me in Aotearoa for my birthday. So Hillary comes. We go to Chinese food, me, my partner, and Hillary. And I woke up that morning, and there's a song by the group Kindred the Family Soul, who I love, 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 called My Time. And it goes, I'm ready. This is my time. All that I hope for is mine. It's mine. It's mine. I'm ready. This is my time. All that I hope for is mine. It's mine. It's mine. It's mine. So, I love, 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 love that song. And I woke up on my birthday and it felt like a mantra. It felt like I was in ceremony calling something in. It felt like a summoning of something. And I remember just singing it in my den, weeping and crying, and feeling so overwhelmed with joy and possibility that I was calling in my time. Now, what I want y'all to know is be careful what you sing. I know I've said this before. I am good for singing something and summoning some things in and not thinking about the full magnitude and scope of what it is I'm summoning. But I said it was my time. And life said, great, hold my beer. And so I went on tour in January. I came back in first week of March. So yeah, mid-January, all of February, first week of March. Now, when I was on tour, the first little inklings of COVID were out in these streets. And, people were talking about it spreading. And I got really blessed. I think I had one event get canceled out of my, what might have been 13 events in the U.S. One of them got canceled. And it wasn't, maybe it was like 9. I think I had 9 events. And maybe I had 10 and I ended up with 9. And so by the time I left, when I was on my plane back to New Zealand, there were 5 cases of COVID in Aotearoa. The other thing that was happening is that I had rented this magnificent house, huge house called Blackwood Manor. It had an in-ground swimming pool, like a 6 feet deep in-ground swimming pool. It had a pool house. It had a 4-bedroom, incredibly updated main house with a butler's pantry and an induction stove and skylights, and then there was an additional 1-bedroom flat off the back of the house. There were meditation walking trails. There were pathways and groves with benches you could sit in. It was stunning. Now, why was Sonya living? Someone visited my house at the time and asked me if I was a crypto millionaire. So I was living good, y'all. Now, why did I have this fabulous, glorious house other than I should have fabulous, glorious houses? I was going to hold retreats, radical self-love healing retreats in my home. And so I rented a house that was big enough to hold, 5 to 8 participants for these healing retreats. And when I was on my plane and there were 5 cases of COVID, I had 5 people who were coming to Aotearoa to participate in the Radical Self-Love Healing Retreat. And I just had this instinct on the plane. I said, I don't really know what this is, but it seems like it's not a safe idea to invite total strangers from another country to come all the way across the world in the middle of whatever unknown this is. And so from the plane, I canceled my retreats, which were to begin in 2 weeks. So I gave folks 2 weeks notice that we were not going to have the retreats. So that was March. Let's say I arrived back in March 5th. My partner picked me up from the airport. Now, before I left, my partner and I were at the airport, and my partner was so sad and so sensitive and teary-eyed about my leaving in a way that felt unusual. And I didn't know, right, what was going on, but they were tender. And when I came back, the energy something was off. I could feel it. I'm an incredibly intuitive person. I have told you all 1,000 times, I have 6 placements in Scorpio. All I do is sense the world. All right. All I do is sense, constantly feeling when things are out of order, out of pattern, out of the normal process. I'm immediately aware of it. And I could feel it. I was like, oh, something's up. Something is awry. I don't know what it is, but something's up. So yeah, I could just feel that something was off. Something was strange and off and odd. And I needed it to not be strange and off and odd. And I didn't know why they were off, and I didn't know what was exactly going on, but I knew that something was going on. I greeted my partner. We came back. And I'm going to share some details that perhaps I wouldn't in another case, but it feels pertinent to this experience because my body was telling me things and I wasn't yet listening. And so my partner and I made love, and I couldn't orgasm, which is rare, not a normal experience for me, particularly with my partner. But my body was not responsive to them. It felt like it was keeping them out. And I didn't know why, and I didn't know what was going on. But I knew that it was odd. Something felt off. So me and my partner are having this, experience of my body being non-responsive to them. One of the things that's also happening, back in December, my partner introduced me to one of their coworkers and they had a crush on them. And my partner was the type of person who was crushy. So I was like, oh, that's cute. And when I came back, my partner had shared, how this sort of evolving crush that was happening with this coworker. And I share this less to talk about the dynamic of the relationship and more to talk about the way in which I could hide things from myself. I really experienced a real resistance to being able to hear what my partner was saying to me because it threatened something inside of me. It threatened something, and I didn't want to be threatened. I said at the beginning of the relationship, I'll just wait until life kicks me off. And I didn't want to see that life was about to kick me off. And so I minimized a lot of what it was that my partner had communicated to me. I acted like it wasn't really a big deal. I just sort of treated it like it wasn't a major thing. And that wasn't true, but that's definitely how it was I was operating. And so I was so ready to not be lonely anymore. And I was so deeply embedded in my story of abandonment that I couldn't see my way out, and I didn't want to, is the truth. I didn't want to see my way out. The way it all went down, it was March 23rd of 2020. When I arrived home, my dog, Anastasia Duchess, my dog of 12 years, I'd had her since she was 8 weeks old. Anastasia had already beat mammary cancer and had already turned over, come back from some illnesses. And, she's just an incredibly resilient and incredible animal. Anastasia had immigrated to New Zealand, which is an incredibly wild process that costs thousands of dollars and months of time to immigrate your dog. And I did. I immigrated Anastasia to Aotearoa. And when I came back from this trip to the United States, she was not doing well. She just seemed off and she was lethargic. And so I made an appointment to get her into the vet. I want to say it was maybe March 23rd. I believe this was March 23rd. What I do know is it was a Monday. Monday night, Anastasia was really ill, and I took her to the emergency vet. And I left her there. And when they called me the next day, they told me that Anastasia had what was likely liver cancer. And, that if they did chemo, it might extend her life for a few months or maybe a year at best. But that it was going to be exorbitantly expensive. Of course, she was going to have to go through this incredibly painful thing that she wouldn't understand why I was subjecting her to that kind of discomfort and pain. And then it was only going to maybe extend her life for a year at best. And so basically they were just like, your dog's going to die. So I got that news on Tuesday. On Wednesday, my partner came home. We were walking on a beach and walking Anastasia on a beach. My partner came home late, like 3 a.m. And so the next day we go and take Anastasia for a walk on the beach. And my partner tells me they're in love with their coworker. And it was a far more dramatic experience than that. Actually, what's important to know is I knew that this relationship was needed to end. And I wasn't going to end it. I said it multiple times. I have to be kicked out of this. I'm not going anyplace. Because there were ways in which my partner demonstrated love that felt so incredible that the idea of giving it up seemed absurd. It seemed like, why would I ever do that? And so my partner tells me that they are in love with their coworker. And that was the beginning of the crash. It was the first piece of what felt like a glass house, the side of it getting shattered. And there was a moment where I was having what felt like definitely an internal crisis of some sort. And I was having a breakdown and was sobbing hysterically. My partner came in the room, and I have had a history of hospitalizations and suicidal ideation in my past. My partner was very afraid that I might harm myself or something. And, the truth of the matter is, I have had hospitalizations, I have had suicidal ideation, but I was way past that at this point. There was something that was shattering that needed to shatter. And it was brutally painful, but it needed to shatter. And so I was definitely having some sort of breakdown. And there was a moment when I was standing outside and my partner had come out behind me, and I'm crying and screaming outside. And I recall that we're living out a mirror image of an experience of my childhood when my mother was screaming outside and my father went out behind her, and then we went outside to see what was happening. And I felt like I was in my own past, like as my mother and as myself and as my young self, and then as the observer watching all of this happen all at the same time. And it was like four different timelines presented themselves concurrently, and I could see them all. I had enough awareness to know that I was clearly living out some sort of horrific childhood pattern in real time. Like I was not just living out a pattern, but that our timelines had merged, that there was some way in which I was both my mother and myself and my child self all at the same time. And all of it was collapsing. It was such a discombobulating experience. So that was a Wednesday. Thursday, my partner and I end our relationship. Friday, the country goes into a 24-hour a day lockdown. Basically, there are no services open. You can't order takeout. You can't, grocery stores, hospitals. Those are the services that are open. Everything else is closed. There's no place to go. And initially, my partner, when we had the conversation about ending the relationship on a Thursday, so we're tracking. My dog gets cancer on Tuesday. My partner tells me they're in love with someone else on Wednesday. I have some timeline fracture. Wednesday night, Thursday, we break up. Friday, the country goes into a complete and total lockdown. And my partner was just going to go live in the back flat. And I was going to live in the main house. And so that was the plan initially. And they had offered to go someplace else. And I think I was trying to be nice. I was trying to do the right thing. And so they had agreed to stay in the back house, one in the other, the 1-bedroom flat. And Saturday morning, we're in complete and total lockdown. And I am losing it. Like the level of the suspicion that my partner was going to have this person over to the house that they were in love with, and, I was losing it. And I was clear that if I had had them stay in the house, I was going to go full 6 placement Scorpio, which was not what I was trying to do. And so I asked them to leave. And they did. And there are a lot of details that I could get into, but this is not about that. And it's not actually about them. It's about the circumstances and conditions that needed to be present for this particular kind of cracking open to happen. And they were, a part of the conditions and circumstances. And in some ways, I honor the role, no matter how painful it was. I honor the role that they came to play in my life to bring me to this point. That it was actually really essential, even if it was incredibly painful.
You think you are dying, but you are being born.
Mundane Miracles with Sonya Renee Taylor is produced by Sonya Renee Taylor, edited by Dr. Shannon Weber. Our opening music is Joy and Grief by Sean and Abigail Bingson of the Bingsons. Our closing song is Dying by the Bingsons. Join us in the ritual of collecting evidence by rating, commenting, and subscribing to Mundane Miracles on Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can get early access to episodes and support our radical love work by becoming a member on Patreon at patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor. That's patreon.com/Sonya Renee Taylor.